Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm delighted to introduce you to Danielle Bridge, who is founder and CEO of ABC Life Support. And she's here today. She's going to talk to us about the benefits of mental health for individuals, for the team, and for the business. So Danielle, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Better take myself off of mute. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming today. So as Sadie mentioned, I'm the CEO of ABC Life Support, and we deliver physical and mental health first aid training across the UK. So today's webinar, chat, talk, interactive session is all about mental health first aid specifically. Hi, and I'm going to be using a presentation, and it's a bit interactive, so please do feel free to get involved. So it's about an hour, and I'm going to be doing it in about 45 minutes with Q&A, so please feel free, write down your questions, but also I will be asking for feedback as we go through anyway. Right, let's jump on. Please let me know. Sadie, can we see this? Excellent. So mental health first aid. A bit about mental health first aid, first of all. So MHFA England came over here in 2001, and it was designed to give psychoeducation around mental health specifically. And it's an amazing tool to be able to look after our staff at work. So I will start by asking one very specific question, comes from a place of knowledge, bear with me, and it is, if my screen will work, how are you? If you've been asked this question, normally the reply is, I'm fine, thanks. In fact, when people say, how are you? How often do any of you give the honest answer? So how many of you actually tell people how you're feeling? That is a question, by the way, and please feel free to use the chat function if you wish as we go through, and I'll be able to access that as we go through the session. How many of you are honest when people ask you, how are you? And I once delivered a training session to a group of people, and there was somebody on there who was from Poland, and she said, when I came to this country and I was working, people used to say to me, how are you? And she would go to give them the answer, but they'd already be halfway down the corridor by the time she started speaking to them. I said, oh, my lovely, that's because in this country we tend to use how are you as a greeting rather than actually a direct question. And the power behind mental health first aid is it starts with that question, how are you? Excellent. So it depends who's asking. If it's a neighbour or employer, then my answer is always fine. I love that, Anna. If it's an employer, I'm always fine. Or if it's a neighbour, I'm always fine. See, I'm terrible. You're completely opposite to me. Because if I go and get petrol, I'm not going to talk about petrol. If I go into a supermarket and somebody says, oh, hi, how are you? I go, well, today I might be X, Y, Z. A bit of an oversharer. So, yeah, it's interesting that we talk about how are you? And we use it as a greeting. And then when somebody starts to talk about something quite serious, then that question becomes quite serious. So I want to find out today how you are. So please write down in the chat how you are feeling today. And Heidi says, depends on the person that's asking, but around 20% honestly. How are you today? How are you right now? Stressed, tired. Positive, but a bit tired, a bit poorly. Tired and overwhelmed. I think that's the energy at the moment, isn't it, Anna, as well? Super stressed. Oh, David, super stressed, not just stressed, super stressed. Okay. Tired, got 43-year-old, a little tired, but marching on, as we do. Okay, not helped by the weather. It's only going to get worse, Francis, that weather, isn't it? And, you know, seasonal affective disorder is a very real thing, which we do need to take advantage of, right? We do need to understand that process and prepare for it in a way. So you can understand, therefore, the power of that one question, and mental health first aid helps you become armed with what to do with the answer for that question. When we sit down and truly ask someone, how are you? And we give them the space to recognise and to take time and to give us their answer, it's a gift. It's an absolute gift. So thank you all very much for giving your answers. And I'm not surprised by them. I said to my husband the other day, the energy at the moment, man, is just a little bit draining, and it's a little bit, you know, we've got Brexit, we've got the fuel crisis, we've got winter coming around the corner, we've got COVID still, it's not gone anywhere. It just seems to be this negative energy vibe, man. So you're not on your own if you're feeling like that. You're definitely not on your own. So I want you to take a moment to think about some statistics. So these statistics should be taken with a pinch of salt. This is for those people who have disclosed any issues when it comes to their mental health. And we'll dive a little bit more into what mental health is shortly. But at the moment, I want to find out what you think about these statistics. So take a moment to read through them. I'm not going to read through all of them. Take a moment to read through them. And then in the chat, let me know which one out of the 5 we have listed here you are most shocked by. And they're all quite shocking, to be fair, but which one are you personally most shocked by when you're looking at these stats? Three. Philippa, you're off mute. Would you like to say something?
No.
Sometimes people forget they're off mute, and I'm like, I ask them, like, no, I don't talk. Okay, no worries.
I didn't realise I was off mute. I'll turn it back on.
It's okay, no worries. So age 15 to 18, yes. Somebody says points. Yeah, that one seems to be quite shocking to most people. The amount of working days lost. So Anna says the last one, 69% of all UK line managers say that supporting employee wellbeing is a core skill, but 13% have received the training. What shocks me most about that, Anna, is what about the remaining UK line managers that say that supporting employee wellbeing is a core skill? What about those people? It's quite interesting. Yeah, so if our young people, if all mental ill health starts by age 15 and 75% develop by age 18, we've got some work to do, right? This isn't a situation which applies in the workplace. This is a situation that applies across the board for every age range. The last one, only 16, yeah. Yes, age 15, having a hormonal year-old, 17-year-old son myself, absolutely. I've got an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. I feel your pain. Although, Philippa, I was hoping it ended by then, age 17. So yeah, it happens, right? All of us. And like I said before, those stats are underestimated. This is for people who have been in services. This is for people who have disclosed this stuff, right? It's for people who feel comfortable enough or have been forced into a position where their status, if you like, around their mental health is obvious or been made apparent for people. So those are quite shocking, but like I said before, underestimated. And also that point on the right-hand side, stigma prevents these numbers from being bigger because we don't really talk about mental health, or we talk about it from a position of them and us. And it is certainly not that. So if it's not a position of them and us, then what is it? The key for us is to recognise and accept that we have to deal with problems and situations and that they need to be processed and actioned. All right, we're not helpless in this mental health space. We can do things. There are things that we can empower people to be able to do. Mental health first aid is one of them. So talking about mental health first aid then, or mental health, first of all, it makes sense to recognise what mental health is. So just take a bit of a moment to read through that on the right-hand side. Everybody has it. Every single one of us have mental health. When I delivered this course back in the day, I asked the question. So when we do face-to-face training, we ask the delegates, what does mental health mean to you? And I've often asked, have you spoken about mental health in the past 48 hours? And maybe 50% of people say yes. Have you talked about mental health in the past week? And 100% of those people would say yes, because it's on the national agenda at the moment. People are talking about it quite a lot. And so when we talk about mental health, we always talk about, or tend to talk about, mental ill health. And actually, yes, there we go. When anyone discusses mental health, it's always from the negative rather than the positive or healthy positions, or the position that actually we all have mental health, like we all have physical health. And I've been wondering for many years why we've separated the two. Why have we separated mental health from physical health? Does anyone know what the answer could potentially be? And actually, while you're thinking about that, if we think about the hospitals that we have, there are two types of hospital. There is a hospital for your physical health, and there is a hospital for your mental health. Even though the last time I checked, my mental health, my brain, my mind sits within my body, and those two things work in conjunction with one another. Anna says it's not tangible or visible like physical health is. Absolutely. And David says, I guess you can see the physical health. Yes. So you can see those conditions, and therefore they can be measured. Stigma to mental health, and possibly people would judge, and stigma, the fear of being labelled. But where does this stigma come from? And you can come off mute if you want to join in the conversation. Where does the stigma come from? A historic lack of understanding, the state of your mental health affects your physical health, and vice versa. Yep, historical, previously having been hospitalised for illness, yep. Lack of understanding. My mother, historical, okay. The PR around it and how it's still being presented. I love that, Anna, thank you. Has anyone seen Beauty and the Beast? Beauty and the Beast, one of my children's favourite Disney films when we were younger. And I never used to do this, but I've obviously been doing it a hell of a lot more since I've been involved in this space. I stop TV programmes at the moment and I use it as a teaching opportunity. And my 13-year-old son does this now. Oh, mum, because, you know, I'm educating my children, goodness. And with Beauty and the Beast, Gaston, which is, he's just all kinds of troubled, and, you know, if he actually existed in today's society, we would have some serious issues, right? But he tries to get Belle to become his wife by having Maurice, her father, committed. Did anyone remember that? But it's not just that, it's the way in which it was portrayed. So Maurice is in his house, and all of a sudden the door slams open and these two burly guys walk in, and then in between these two burly guys is a man in a white jacket with a really dark looking angry face, dark circles under his eyes, looks quite sinister, and he walks in and they put Maurice in a straitjacket. And then they take him outside and he's kicking and screaming, and they throw him in the back of this carriage and off he goes to the asylum. That is historically the concept or the idea that we have around mental illness, mad, lunacy, and it still stays with us. And so, I don't know about you, but every opportunity I get now, especially with my own children, because it's the only thing I can do, is the only control I have, other than doing this sort of stuff outside of my home, is to educate my children about the lack of knowledge and understanding that these programs can sometimes give. Because in doing so, I'm hoping to break down stigma within my own home, to bring up my children to have conversations which are empathetic and helpful. And the work that I'd done over the years, now that I said Sebastian is 13, and he said to me the other day, Mum, something happened on my WhatsApp group. And I said, okay, well, do you want to talk about it? And he said, yeah, somebody had called one of our other classmates a psycho, and they were all laughing and joking. He said, so I went online and I found the definition of psychopath, and I put it in the chat, and I told our friends that they probably shouldn't use those terminologies because they don't understand what it means, and our friend isn't a psychopath. And I sat down and went, my job here is done. My job here is done. I felt extremely proud of myself for that. And I felt extremely proud of my son to put his head above the parapet and have these difficult conversations amongst teenagers who use this language, which is stigmatizing, not realizing how damaging it could be in their own mindset, not necessarily to each other, but how they perceive things. So we've got a lot of work to do when it comes to language around mental ill health, because it's unhelpful. Because when people do become unwell, they know that people view them like that because there's no other narrative. The media talks about, you know, schizophrenic kills, blah, 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 or psycho, blah, blah, blah. And then we are wondering why, when somebody's suffering really badly from mental illness, they don't want to talk about it because they already know what society thinks about people who are unwell. And it couldn't be further from the truth. So we've got to break down stigma. So we all have mental health. Every single one of us have mental health. There is no health without mental health. And it's definitely not a them and us situation. And what it isn't is what one woman said to me is, oh, wow, after this bit we've done on a course. I said, oh, why the light bulb moment? Because I was chuffed by that. And she said, I thought, and this was a 46-year-old woman, she said to me, Danielle, I thought that mental health was when somebody was a bit woohoo, this is her words, not mine, but somebody was a bit woohoo. And I said, so what you mean is somebody's showing outward signs of a struggle with their mental health or mental illness, perhaps. I don't know, they could be speaking to themselves, hearing voices, etc., and be vocal about that. Is that what you meant? And she said, yeah, I thought they had mental health. It's like, so that's exactly like Carla said earlier, I think Carly, who said, you know, we see it when it's mental ill health, not that actually everyone's got it. And if everyone's got it, then surely for me, that is one of the most unifying facts that we can have to start opening up a dialogue. All right, opening up a dialogue, just like Farriers Local, I don't know your name, but says not wishing to be seen as different. And that kind of conversation will break down those barriers because we've all got it. And the next thing is that we will recognize when I show you the next slide is if we've all got it, then surely we can all join in the conversation. And that's where the next part comes in. If you've all got mental health, we know that there is a negative narrative around it. So if we can all be open and honest about our own struggles with our own mental health and normalize the conversation, then it will make it as normal as somebody calling in sick at work who says, my leg is broken, I fell down the stairs, I'm not going to be in work for the next 6 weeks. Here's my sick note for the first, whatever, and it's really bad, and that's it. If somebody rings up and says, my mental health is really bad right now, I'm unable to function, I'm unable to cope with work, and I'm going to be off the next six weeks. What we don't automatically do is go to that negative space, that negative bias of, yeah, okay, because anyone can say they're depressed these days, or anyone can say they're anxious these days, or we come from a position of belief. Because if everyone's got it, then everybody can empathize with others about their struggles. So the continuum is a fantastic model that we use on our training, and we really explore this continuum. You're not going to obviously get that today, but the continuum is all about recognizing that if we've all got mental health, then we are all somewhere on this continuum. And the pandemic for me has shown us quite dramatically that our mental health can suffer as a result of mass situations. So I'll talk you through it in a little bit more detail. So what you can see here in front of you is 4 quadrants. The vertical axis, maximum mental well-being, mental health and well-being, and minimum mental health and well-being is a relatively new model, if you like. It's a social construct, it's a social model, because it's easier to talk about well-being and mental health than it is about mental illness. Historically, over the years, it was either that you were very, very unwell or you weren't. That was it. There was nothing in between. And I think that this new model, this relatively new model, is amazing because every single one of you on this call are on here somewhere. Every single one of us. Now, if that's not unifying, I don't know what is, right? If that doesn't make you feel good, I don't know what that does. If it makes you less feeling alone, then that's amazing. But we've also got to recognize that everybody else is somewhere on this continuum. Now, I'm not going to ask you where you are, but what I will say is that if you were a person who was top right, so somebody with no mental illness or disorder, and who has positive and good mental health, man, that is the best place to be. That's where I want to be. Everyone wants to be there. Living your best life, everything's great, healthy, life is good, got enough money, you know, family's fantastic, etc., etc. And if I'm honest, that was more my attitude towards life pre-pandemic. Because during the pandemic, I dropped to the bottom right-hand side. I became somebody with no diagnosis of a mental illness, but who had poor mental health. Or I'm just using me as an example, hypothetically. And that was me. I became really lethargic. I couldn't bother to get out of bed. I was drinking far too much. And I don't know about you, but I mean, it's my 40th birthday 2 years ago. And I had quite a lot of champagne left over from, so 2019 was my 40th. And I got lots of champagne for my birthday. It was lovely, and I had a lovely rack full of lots of bottles of champagne. 2020 March, maybe I started off with, I don't know, 8 bottles left. By June, they're probably gone. I thought the world was ending. Literally, my husband and I were going, well, it's Tuesday, we're still alive. Fancy a bottle of champagne? Great. And that mentality around the pandemic and not knowing what was going to happen and hearing about all of these deaths and all of these cases, it weighed down so heavily upon a lot of people that their mental health struggled, even if they'd had prior good mental health, because our mental health dips at times in our life naturally. A death, a loss, a bereavement, a loss of job, all sorts of things. Illness could cause somebody's mental health to deteriorate, and that's a normal, natural response to life. And so this pandemic, which affected all of us, meant that a lot of people's mental health suffered. And I know this to be fact. My mother is a mental health social worker who lives next door to me in the annex, and she came home and has continued to come home broken. The NHS system is overrun and broken, and people are on their knees. They are burnt out. And that's all as a result of a global pandemic. So I've just used the pandemic just to explain to you how the continuum works. Now, a lot of people will sit on that bottom right-hand side. For me, it's painful because they will not seek help. They'll not seek help because of stigma. They won't reach out because they're not sure whether or not they're going to get the support. They won't reach out because last time they become unwell, they didn't get the support that they needed. So they'll sit here, and a lot of people sit in this right-hand side of the continuum, and it's painful for me. Because I understand why people don't get the help that it is that they need for lots of reasons. Somebody said, incredibly true. I've noticed people even online suffering poor mental health. Absolutely, Heidi. It's rife at the moment. We can't underestimate that. And so what will happen here, and this is the important part, people who sit in the bottom right hand of the continuum for too long, who do not get the help that they need, in time will often pop to the left. All right? If they pop over to the left, we're in some serious problems right now, because this here is where what we call crisis. Somebody with a diagnosis because they receive one, either inadvertently, where they're detained under the Mental Health Act perhaps, or they go to the doctors because an intervention is had by a loved one or by work or something like that, where they may be diagnosed with depression, or they may be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, or they may be diagnosed with X amount of other possibilities. That person there needs time, space, empathy, understanding, a plan for them to be able to then go to the top left hand of the continuum, where they are somebody with a diagnosis of a serious mental illness, but who copes well and has positive and good mental health because they've had the support that they need. Unfortunately, if people do not get the help that they get in the bottom left-hand side, that's when we can often experience suicide. All right, so people take their life because they're in crisis and haven't got the help and the support that they need. So on a mental health first aid course, we teach people to recognise signs of serious deterioration in one's mental health and how to open up a dialogue and a conversation which will help to signpost somebody to the help and support they need, give them the space they need, offer a listening ear with training to be able to know what to say to somebody who is in desperate need of support and help. And often, like it is on a physical first aid course, if somebody has a cardiac arrest, getting them to the doctors isn't going to work, right? We need to work on them right then and there to be able to maintain their life until the emergency services arrive. Mental health first aid is pretty much the same. We are there to maintain life until the professionals arrive, and that takes training, knowledge, and understanding. The continuum is a brilliant tool to be able to recognise and support and explore the meaning of mental health and well-being and how we can have an interaction. But what's also really important here, which is total opposites, somebody with a diagnosis of a serious mental illness, but who copes well and has positive, good mental health, can be living their best life. However, somebody with no diagnosis and no diagnosis of a mental illness can be in really poor mental health. So we can move around this continuum based upon the things that we come up against in our lives. But it's about recognising our position and understanding that nothing is set in stone, it's movable, it's a continuum for a reason. Now, before I move from this particular slide, which I feel is really informative, have I got anybody with any questions at this point? And you can either take yourself off of mute and ask, or you can pop something in the chat and I can answer it later. Okay, so as I said before, summary, having a diagnosis does not necessarily mean that someone's mental health is poor right now. You could have a diagnosis of a mental health condition, but right now be able to manage it and function well at work and home. Equally, they might not have a particular diagnosis, but be finding things very difficult. Yeah, so Farias said also people do not like to be seen as not coping. Yes, so they do things, they're not coping privately. If you work in an organisation, this is a fact for you. Your mental health difficulties, as in your staff's mental health difficulties, take place in your toilets. Fact. Because people often sit in an office, they will be going through whatever it is they're going through. Somebody might say something, might trigger a response. That person will just pop into the loo, they'll go to the loo, they'll sit there with their head in their hands. They might be crying their eyes out, flushing the loo, obviously, to mask the sounds. Then they'll get themselves together and then open the toilet door and off they go. And nobody would ever be aware of that mini breakdown in the toilet. So we often tell people or organisations that we do work with on strategic work, be aware of the behaviours that we know humans to be, because of what you've just said there. Nobody wants people to see it. So they do it privately. It happens, but they'll do it privately. And so the best thing for us, what we tell organisations to do, is to be aware of that and to place important information about how you support your staff in the toilet door. All right, put it on the back of your toilet door, because it could be that that person goes there with their phone, takes a bit of respite, maybe they'll take a photo of it. And maybe they'll call later on, or maybe they're aware of an EAP that you have, an employee assistance program, that says, you know, having a tough time, remember, we're always here. You get 10 counselling services offers as part of your service. Be aware that we're here to talk. And then a testimonial from somebody in your business who's used the service as a testimonial, right? There are things that you can do to get people on board and break down organisational stigma around mental health. So somebody says, I think women are even more wary. Yes, they are often historically sectioned as being hysterical for normal things. Yes. So in the workplace, you want to avoid any excuse for not being given a promotion, so keep a facade of strength and being in control. I also think there are generational differences on disclosure. Categorically correct. And what you've talked about there also hits on a number of ways, Francis, because we've also got the intersectionality part of what you've just talked about. You know, our experiences as women and our mental health, our experiences of women who are going through menopause as part of our which affects our mental health. My experience as a Black woman with menopause and working with mental health. Somebody's experience as a gay person who works in an organisation who might be, do you know what I mean? We've got all of these other things that people live with that we have to take into consideration when we are supporting them. And actually, it's quite interesting. A lot of people are opening up dialogues now about things that are affecting individuals in the workplace. We're having lots of conversations about menopause and the effect in the organisation. I've got one of our guys, he heads up the mental health and wellbeing here, delivery for us, Tony, his name is, and he is doing something for World Men's Mental Health Month in November around anger, which is quite interesting because we're talking about men coming to the conversation for mental health, and it's all around men can talk, men should be happy to talk, men should be vulnerable, etc. But it doesn't talk about anger, which is a very normal and natural reaction and emotion, but it's a negative one, so no one wants to talk about it. So here at ABC Life Support, we like to push boundaries and talk about things that most people don't. And so we're going to be talking about anger and its part to play in mental health, specifically around men. So that's not to say women don't get angry, by the way, just to put it out there. It's just, you know, by looking at these intersectionality pieces. So yeah, you're bang on there, absolutely. So when we're thinking about these, we need to be aware of what's already up against us, but open up dialogue. Open up dialogue, start having conversations. Now, this quote was from Nigel Carrington, who was from the University of Arts London, and he took part, this came from the Thriving at Work report. So I will send the report to Sadie after today, who can send it out to you if you're interested. It's the report that was delivered by, was requested by the May government in 2017, where she wanted to put mental health first aid specifically next to physical first aid training within organisations to make sure that we are looking after our staff under the Health and Safety at Work Act of 1974. And he says that everyone is somewhere on the mental health spectrum. So this is a business productivity issue which should be dealt with alongside other health and safety considerations. Creating a positive environment for mental health demonstrably costs less than failing to do so, especially when we know that mental ill health costs UK governments up to £99 billion a year. And I don't know about you, but that sort of money doesn't make any sense to me. From the minute we're going above like 10 million, I'm like, I don't even know what that means. It's just too much to even quantify. So we know that it costs us in productivity, lost productivity, and our turnovers for our staff, billions of pounds. So we're going to go after organisations to be aware of it. It affects the bottom line. We need to be aware of that. So some of the things that people could be living with when we are talking about the signs and symptoms of mental ill health, not diagnosis, or they could have a diagnosis. Some of this stuff is internal, right? Well, for some of it you might be able to see if you're in externally, but these are some of the things that a person could be experiencing as a result of recognition for their poor mental health. So poor concentration, talking more, jumping very fast, jumping between topics and ideas. And some of our diagnoses might talk about mania, where somebody is experiencing quite a lot going on and they are able to experience that and expel that. Low mood, worrying more, sleeping more or less, feeling less interested in day-to-day activities. And one of the main symptoms of depression is when a person loses the ability to gain joy from the things that normally gave them joy. So if somebody, for example, loves going to the gym, when they are in a depressive state, that's the one thing that they know that they love, but that doesn't even get them out of bed, that kind of thing. Aggression, tearfulness, talking less and avoiding social activities. That would be something that people might pick up from me if I was having a low moment, that I can't be bothered to talk to people, I'm tired, and I'm not going out. And I'm totally opposite, which is why lockdown was such a problem for me. I'm definitely a social butterfly. I love getting out there and talking to people, hence why I've also got a podcast. I do like talking. So when I don't talk, people recognise that in me, and that normally prompts that conversation. Danny, are you okay? And I might tell them I'm not, or I might be, yeah, I'm fine, I'm just not feeling it at the moment, or I'm hormonal, or actually I've had an argument with my husband. Actually, that's what happens in my office. We have to talk about stuff like that. Feeling overwhelmed by things, drinking or eating more, being easily distracted, tiredness, lack of energy, finding it difficult to make decisions, irritability and short temper. And if you are running a business, some of these might take place as part of disciplinary procedures. And that's why mental health first aid specifically talks about picking up these sorts of things when you're going through disciplinary as a way of recognising that there could be something bigger at play. I think it's unfortunate that we have to get that far to be able to pick up on these changes, because it affects the business productivity so much that you end up having to speak to somebody. If we can get in early, then we can recognise, mental health first aid helps you recognise getting in there and doing things like reasonable adjustments for somebody, giving them the space to be able to have conversations and talk outside of the business when we're doing things like when somebody's off, absence management. If you are an organisation that contacts your staff when they're off, do you do it from a position of, how are you? I don't really want to talk about work, but how are you today? Or actually, when you're coming back to the office, because I know which one sounds better, just saying. Finding it difficult to control your emotions, tearfulness. So these are some of the things that you might see from somebody in your business, but these are also some of the things that they could be feeling within the business whilst they are going through to work. And actually, it's quite interesting. It's not on the previous slide, but I wanted to talk about it. There is something called presenteeism. Can anyone tell me what presenteeism is? You've got absenteeism, but we've got a phenomena called presenteeism. Please let me know if you know what that is. Anyone?
Turning up for work when you're not really feeling your best, but you feel you ought to be there, either to appear that you can cope with your role, or because you're frightened that somebody might take your role off you.
Exactly. Thank you. Couldn't have said it any better myself, Nicola. And thank you, Heidi, being in place but not actually focusing on work yet. So you're in work, but your mind's not there. You shouldn't be there. And it's dangerous. If you're in a high profile position or a high risk job, for example, and your mind is not on the job, It could mean that people become injured, for example, if you're in a work, a high risk environment. So the fact that people struggle through to be there means then that we are putting our workforce at risk because of the fact that all of these things tell me I should muddle through and I don't deserve to be at home because I'm not physically unwell, so therefore I can be there. That's what presenteeism is, and it actually costs the UK economy twice that of absenteeism. So it's a big deal. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you. Heidi. A recent example of this is Gabby Douglas at the Olympics. Absolutely. Absolutely, I couldn't have said, and yet there was another example of somebody saying absolutely not doing it, and we talk about this braveness of being brave, and I hope we get to a position where somebody doesn't have to be labelled being brave to do the things that we should just naturally do in order to look after ourselves. If she'd have broken her leg and gone, actually, I'm pulling out because I've broken my leg, they wouldn't say she's brave. They'd say, well, of course, you've broken your leg. You're not going to be able to do that. That would be silly. But the fact that it's something that you can't see, it's this braveness of it. And part of me is like, okay, it's great because we're getting kind of exposure and talking about it. But I want to see a time when it's just normal. It's just normal that people take time off because they're mentally unwell. And actually, one of the things that we're kind of doing as the next generation, if you like, one of my very, very good friends is called Sarah Hughes, and she's the chief executive for the Centre for Mental Health. And they are the government's policy writers. Phenomenal organisation. And her daughter and my daughter go to school together. And when they were in primary school, I remember her daughter took a couple of days off. And the school called her and said, why is she off? Why is your daughter off? And she said, oh, she's having a mental health day. She's tired. And I said to her, what did they say? And she says, well, what could they say? You're talking to somebody that governs this stuff, right? And when we start to take this stuff seriously, but make it part of our normal and everyday experience, then there's nothing to argue. And I think the school went, oh, okay, fine. They're tired, they're exhausted, right? Sometimes enough is enough. You just need to go back to bed, right? But I don't know about you, but I had to physically be dying in order to get a day off school when I was younger. Like, what's wrong with you? Oh, sore throat, mum. Well, you can talk at school. It was that kind of attitude, right? Which means that as adults, we have that same mentality, that legacy that's, oh, well, I'm not dying. Remember when I was a kid, I had to go, so I'm just going to push through. And that's physically and mentally. Thank you both for that example, Anna. So in terms of mental health first aid then, what can we do to support ourselves and others? Now this one's quite interesting because it talks about organisational and also being aware of your organisation, and then we'll have a look at individually. So from an organisational point of view, review your current provision honestly and with buy-in from department leads. Now this kind of work is either done because you have a really conscientious CEO who believes in all of it, or they've had lived experience and understand how important it is to look after staff and to take this stuff seriously. And then you have to sit down and go, right, what have we got? What are we doing? Where's our health and safety reports? Where are our health and safety policies? What do we have to do by law? And what would we really like to do? And it says here, honestly, because as you saw in one of the previous slides, some members of staff, some senior leaders think it's fantastic, but they don't really know what they're doing with it. So what have we got right now? And how do our staff feel about this provision right now? So auditing, finding out what staff feel that they need in order to be supported in their health and wellbeing process. If you run a big business or you are a leader of a big organisation, you need to get buy-in from each of your department leads. There is no point having this top-down approach when you don't have people in the middle who are buying into what it is that you're trying to do as a business. Then identify any training requirements. So the course that we are running with the Chamber on the 12th of October is the One Day's Champions course. This is a brilliant course if you are a leader or you are somebody who is involved in looking after the business, because this is the course where you are made to understand the health and safety executives' expectations of you. We talk about NICE guidelines. We talk about, how to recognise signs and symptoms of mental ill health, what you should be doing as an organisation to help you kind of process and champion the need for organisations. We also run mental health first aid training, which is a 2-day course, mental health first aid specifically, where a person becomes a mental health first aider. That does not mean that they sit in your business waiting for people to come and speak to them. That is not what it's about, but it's to recognize that that person keeps going to the loo and they come back with red eyes, and they then learn how to approach that person effectively and appropriately and have an open dialogue where a person has the space to be able to talk about the things that's going on for them if they want to. All right, that's the training, what sorts of training it is that you need to be able to build on this. Awareness for every employee, and I'm going to put this one down into the bottom right. Secure buy-in from communication departments and embark on a programme of wellbeing all year round. So it's World Mental Health Day next month. The idea for World Mental Health Day, which leads into what Anna said earlier, is mental health in an unequal world. Throughout COVID, somebody said to me on a training course, well, you know, COVID, I know it's affected all of us. We're all in the same boat. And I stopped them and said, we are categorically not in the same boat. We might be all in the same storm, but we are all in very different boats, right? You've got some who are riding this in a yacht, and you've got some who are on a raft, barely surviving. So we might all be going through the same thing, but our circumstances mean that we are all living with things very differently, and we need to be aware of that. So that's this month, this next month, tomorrow, isn't it? World Mental Health Day, mental health in an unequal world. That's the focus. Then we have November, which is Men's Mental Health Month. Don't wait for just these months to talk about it. Within your organisations, you should be talking about mental health and physical health, the well-being of your staff all year round. All right. As a business, we go into organisations to help with strategy and have calendar designs for this to help you with your internal communications, talking about employee well-being. So that's that part. Outsource and seek advice. If you do not know what you're doing and you have people in your business who are too busy to implement this stuff, by giving them this stuff to do on top of their jobs might just be a source of stress. It's important stuff, outsource it. Give it to another organisation who's going to come in and help you process and get to where your goals need to be. So that's some tips on some resources on how to look after your organisation or your organisational stuff around mental health and well-being. But from a personal point of view, what can you do? Right. I am a first aider. I do talks on this stuff all over the place. And the one thing I am a massive advocate in is empowerment. What can you do, you as an individual, to exact change in your life and the life of others from a mental health point of view? So giving, 5 ways to wellbeing, keep learning, learn about mental health, learn about something interesting, learn about something either to do with your job or not to do with your job. Personally, I love mental health and I do an awful lot on it, but you can imagine if this was also in my personal life, it would be quite a lot. So I'm on a nutrition course at the moment, and it's a diploma that I'm working through about healthy eating, and it's fascinating. So it gets my mind away from something else. Connection. The one thing we know that the pandemic has caused is a massive problem with isolation and connection. How does your organisation connect with one another? Is it appropriate? Have you asked whether or not it's needed and wanted? One of the organisations I delivered mental health first aid training to was Peterborough Hospital. And one of the legacies that I left there, which was lovely, was that they had every month on a Friday, they had what they called the Frazzled Cafe. So at the end of the month, they go, right, end of month gathering, they got drinks in, and non-alcoholic, obviously, but they could have alcohol. And they had a chat, but it was with a mental health debriefing kind of process around it. So it's right, what's been going on for you? And they had the same clinic for their mental health first aiders as well, but it was a space that people could go to be able to offload at work. You spend an awful lot of your time at work, so it's important that they recognise that you need that time. And if you go, you go. If you don't, you don't. But it's encouraging people to have that open space. Taking notice of what's going on around us in and outside of our work is an amazing thing, and being active. Some organisations have lunchtime runs, or I don't know, walk in the park, or whatever it may or may not be. I remember when I worked in London many years ago, we used to have fitness classes or a gym that was attached to the building, that kind of stuff. But we know that getting out of our heads and out into society, connecting with people in any way you know how, then that's a good thing. human interaction is a good thing. My son is only out with his mates, but I know that there are people when he's at home, one way we connect is for me to play FIFA with him. I'm crap at it, I'm really bad. But the fact that I sit down with a controller in my hand with him, trying to play this computer game is amazing for him. He loves it. So get on people's levels, find out what it is that they like and join in with that as well. And finally, the only thing left to say is thank you. 45 minutes. Wow, that wasn't too bad. We were bang on. 45 minutes just to say thank you so much for your time. I have got a question. Sadie Parr, excellent. In terms of the mental health champions course, the one-day course. But other than that, that's a brief synopsis of what we do in our mental health first aid training. As I said, this course is a one-day champions course, which we often ask either individuals to go on just to get a greater idea and then take it back to an organisation with a plan of how to implement this. But as an organisation, we can also deliver the 2-day mental health first aid course, which is a 2-day intensive skills training course to be able to pick up signs and symptoms of mental ill health within the business and to put in strategy around looking after the well-being of your staff. Thank you so much for your time and your interaction. It's been a pleasure doing this little session for you. And you've got a couple of minutes to ask any questions about anything before you go. So I'll open the floor. Oh, I did such a great job that no one's got any questions. Any questions specifically around the course or anything that is that we can deliver for you?
Can I just
Hi,
say,
Nicola.
I'd like to say thank you very much, because actually it's been really useful and I've been taking copious notes during this, and I've actually asterisked a few ideas that you've given me because I'd like to introduce them into our business.
Oh, fantastic.
Will we get a copy of your slides? Because that one with the 4 different areas is really good, and I think I didn't write that one down, and I find that really helpful to be able to take that to the management. Absolutely,
I can make that available for you, and Sadie can take that over for you.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I'd like to thank you very much. It was a really good talk. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. That's really, really, really nice to hear. Thank you. And yes, go back, Tom. Let them know and give us a shout if you need us to come in and do some work. Thank you, Sadie. Thanks for having me.
No, it's been great. Really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about this today.
No worries. Pleasure. Hopefully we'll see some of them on the training on the 12th, but otherwise I'll leave you to pass on the details, and I'll get in touch with some stuff to send out to everybody. I'll give you the slides to send out.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome. Take care, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.